it as a first of its kind library of potential coronavirus drugs. Quote, with a $2.1 million starting grant from Chinese technology mogul Jack Ma, Dr. David Ho will oversee 4 research teams at Columbia University, whose goal is to find an effective treatment against COVID-19 and other coronaviruses. If you're pursuing a project like this, Dr. David Ho might be exactly the person you want overseeing it. His groundbreaking HIV research changed the course of the AIDS epidemic worldwide in the 1990s. He's been researching and fighting viruses ever since. Dr. Ho is now scientific director and CEO of the Aaron Diamond AIDS Research Center, and I'm very pleased to say that he joins us now here on set. Dr. Ho, you are far away from me at this desk, but that's on purpose. Thank you for being here.
A pleasure.
I know that you were able to hear my introduction a minute ago, and I don't want to ask you to answer for all of it, but when I was talking about you and your research and questions about the coronavirus, I just want to ask you if I said anything that seemed wrong or wrong-headed to you.
No, you got it right.
Okay. We asked you today about things that you might want to convey to the American people to help people understand better about where we're at with this coronavirus problem. And you sent us these graphs, fairly simple graphs, and I walked through them a little bit. But can you describe what's important? We can put them up on the screen again. What's important about the shape that's evident in these graphs and what you see as a scientist looking at these?
Well, the first graph involved what happened in China and in South Korea. And you could see the epidemic just took off based on those daily case numbers and peaked around February 4th with 4,000 cases a day. But with the draconian measures implemented within central China, it got controlled. And it was dropping every week by half, so very steadily. And this past week, I think there are only a handful of cases outside the central province of Hubei in a country of 1.2 billion. So that control is remarkable. And what was not on the graph is what's happening in various provinces and cities in China. And they were held under pretty tight control with no city or province over 1,500 cases. And so what was done in China is quite remarkable. In South Korea, there was also a rather explosive epidemic that followed a few weeks later. And without implementing harsh measures, but by social distancing and good hygiene, they were able to bring it down, albeit with a slope that's not as sharp.
Very aggressive testing is also a characteristic of the South Korean response.
Yes, testing obviously is central. Without testing, you're blind. And if you have no tests, you have no cases. So the other graphs that show what happened in Italy and Spain occur weeks later, and it's following the same trend. It's an exponential growth, with Italy taking off first, but now Spain is following, and Germany and many Western European countries are going through the same thing. And then in New York, what we're seeing is just the beginning. So we're lagging behind another couple weeks. And if we think back 11 days ago, we had the first case in New York City. And then there were a handful of cases every day for about a week. And then 3 days ago, we're seeing cases in the teens. So that's the inflection point.
Part of what we're seeing here is as this moves through time, we see different countries deal with it as it arrives and then takes off.
Right.
But part of what we're seeing here is that even when the raw numbers are different between between us and Italy, the raw numbers that you're talking about here in terms of measuring on these graphs are different. The shape of the curve being the same implies that we are headed in the same direction.
Right, we're just lagging behind by a certain period of time. China started over 2 months ago, Italy about 6 weeks ago, and we're just catching up. And this implies the same wave of epidemic could sweep through, let's say, Middle America, which is lagging behind the New York area and the West Coast.
With the sort of scattershot mitigation measures that are starting to be implemented now in the United States, New York City schools, for example, are still open. with the lack of testing that we've got, which as you say, leaves us blind in terms of how to target these sorts of measures, do you think that the United States holds any hope of bending that curve down at this point, or are we looking at explosive growth for the foreseeable future until we can do something radically different as a country?
Well, we have to remember the cases that were found yesterday in New York City represent what happened about a week ago.
Right.
When transmission occurred. So what we're seeing is about a week behind. And of course, the virus could go through several rounds of spread and expand at least tenfold and maybe 20-fold. So what we see from yesterday is just the tip of the iceberg. And there's a huge mass that we cannot see.
We need a treatment then. We can't wait a year and a half for a vaccine and pin all of our hopes on a therapy, on some sort of pharmaceutical intervention on a vaccine. We need a therapy that cures people of this virus when they've been infected.
We need some intervention that works. Vaccine, if it works, great. Drugs or antibodies all could be utilized to treat infection as well as to block infection.
That's what you're working on now.
We are, as you mentioned, we were funded initially by Jack Ma's foundation to begin to search for drugs that could target this coronavirus. In particular, we're looking at two targets of the coronavirus. One is called the protease and one is called the polymerase. These are important enzymes that the virus uses to replicate itself and to make progeny viruses. And if you block either one, you would interrupt the replication cycle and therefore kill the virus, in essence. And importantly, these are two areas that are well investigated in the context of HIV drug development and hepatitis C drug development. So there's a wealth of knowledge and there's a very rich library of chemicals that are designed already to target proteases or polymerases. And so it's an area where we could move very fast to see if we could find a hit. A hit means it may have some activity against one of those two enzymes, and then optimize that hit into a what we think a candidate drug. But this too is a prolonged process. We could perhaps find a hit in a couple months, but the optimization process would take several more months. And then you then have to do all the manufacturing and safety testing. Mm-hmm. So nothing is going to come really fast. And certainly for this coming year, we're going to have to fight the virus without any effective drug or vaccine.
Dr. David Ho, hearing it from you makes me understand it in a way that I didn't before. It's stark, but it is good to know. Sir, thank you for being here. Thanks. Now go back to work. We'll be right back. Thank you very much.